Hey, hello Cloud Gurus, and welcome to this lecture. In this lecture we're going to look at how we can create a website using S3. So this will be a serverless website because S3 doesn't consist of any servers, and essentially what we're going to do is we're going to put a index.html file and an error.html file into our bucket, and we're going to use a bucket policy to make our bucket public. We're then going to enable our bucket to become a website. So if you've got the time, please join me in the AWS console. Okay, so here I am in the AWS Management Console, and of course we can always find S3 by going under S3, which is under Storage. Now note up here that the region says Global, so that you are getting a global view of all your S3 buckets. And you can see I've got a whole bunch of S3 buckets in here. Now if you actually go over to the region, you'll see that each S3 bucket is actually in an individual region. So S3, even though it looks like a global service, it is regional. And later on in this course, towards the end of this section, we will look at which AWS services are global and which are regional. We'll also look at which AWS services we can use on-premise in our own data center as well. And note down here, you can see the different levels of access. So we've got objects can be public. Where a bucket is completely public, you'll see this orange writing in here, and it means every object in that bucket is public by default. And then by default, you can see in here buckets and objects not public. And if we go and create a bucket, which is what we're going to do now, so let's call it a Cloud Guru my website bucket 2019. Hopefully that's available. Just going to do it into US West 1, and I'm going to go ahead and hit create. And when we create a bucket, by default, we're going to see that it is see in here, it says bucket and objects not public. So when you create a bucket, by default, it makes it not public. If we go in here, we're going to upload some files. You can get these files in the resources section of the course. There should be 3 of them. So go ahead and download them and unzip them. And then what we're going to do is we're going to upload our index and our error.html. And go ahead and click open and go ahead and click upload. So you can see down here the progress. You can see that it has been successful. If I go in and try and make this object, well, let's go ahead and try and view the object first of all. So to view it, we just click in here and you get the object URL. Now, if I go ahead and click on this, I'm going to get an error message and it just says access denied. If we go back to our bucket, we can click in here. And we can go and try and make this object public. The way we do that is we go over to actions and we can try and click in here, but it's all grayed out. So what we have to do is the first thing we need to do is go back to S3. I'm going to find the name of our bucket, so a Cloud Guru my website bucket, and click on edit public access settings. You can see here it says block all public access. I want you to uncheck that and go ahead and hit save. And then it will ask you to confirm, and to do that you type the word confirm in here and go ahead and hit confirm. And you'll see that it's changed the access settings to objects can be public. So if I click in here and let's go ahead and make this object public. So go to actions and then I'll click on make public. Go ahead and make this public. When we actually click on this object now, we should be able to see our landing page. You see it says, hello Cloud Gurus, but that is it. So this is our default landing page. Let's go back. So I'm back in my individual object. I can click up here. If you were to click on error and then click on this URL, you are going to get an error message because essentially this has not been made public. We don't want to make all the objects in our bucket public by clicking on that step. We want to make every single object in our bucket public by default. So we could upload 1,000 files to our S3 website and they would all be public. Now to do that, what we need to do is 2 steps. The first thing is we should probably make this, change this bucket so that it is doing static website hosting. So let's click in here and let's click in use this bucket to host a website. And essentially what I want it to do is every time I go to index our default landing page, so every time we click on this endpoint, we want it to default to index.html. And if we have some kind of error, we want it to go to error.html. So let's go ahead and do that, error.html, and I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And this is now hosting a website. And if I click in here and I click on this link in here, you can see I'm now getting to my default landing page. If we go up to the URL and we go / and then just enter something random, we're going to get an access denied. And the reason we're getting that is because our error.html still doesn't have public access settings. So if we go back here, we could go in and change error.html so that it is public. And we do that by clicking in here and, basically going make public, but we don't want to have to do that for every single file in our website. So what can we do? Well, let's just maximize this here. And let's go over to our permissions. We're going to go over to our bucket policy. And if you open up where you downloaded your different files and unzip them, I'm just going to go ahead and open this up with Text Wrangler. And you can see the file in here. So this is JSON, and essentially it's saying, hey, effect allow, principal is a wildcard. So it's saying allow everything, this action, S3 get object. And then the resource, and then the ARN, which stands for Amazon Resource Name. And this is a unique address across all your AWS resources within your AWS account. And then we just need to update this to be the bucket name. So I want you to copy this into your clipboard, and we're going to paste it in here. And then we're going to grab our ARN, which is just up here, and we're going to paste this in. So instead of having the bucket name, we're just going to paste in here our ARN, AWS S3, and then A Cloud Guru, My Website Bucket 2019. And we're going to go ahead and hit save. The moment we hit save, you'll see straight away it's giving us a new UI, and it's saying, hey, this bucket has public access. And you can see the public policy here saying that it's public. And if we go back over to our properties and click on our static website hosting and click in here, and let's just change the URL. We'll just make up some random address again and hit enter. You can now see that we're getting the error message, and we didn't have to go and make our error.html public, where it basically redirects automatically. And so any file that we upload to S3 will now be public. And if we actually click in here as well, you can see that it says A Cloud Guru, My Website Bucket 2019, and it is now public. So that is how we create buckets in S3 and then make them public. We basically need to go in and add a bucket policy to make it public. We also need to edit the public access settings to make sure it's turned off. And that's it really. And then we basically click in here, we go over to properties, and we go static website hosting, and you host a static website in here. Now, when I worked as a solutions architect, I worked on a major Hollywood film release, and we actually hosted an S3 using static website hosting, and it was able to scale to like literally millions of views automatically. We didn't have to worry about load balancing and EC2 instances, etc. We are going to cover that off later on in the course. But this is a great way of hosting static websites. You might be wondering, well, what does that mean? What is a static website? A static website just means that it's pure like HTML, images, movies, etc. It's not dynamic, so it's not connecting to a database and showing you dynamic content. And later on in this course, we will look at how we can install a WordPress site on EC2 and RDS, and that's a dynamic website. So you can't host dynamic websites on S3, but you can host static websites on S3. And the great thing about doing it is that it scales automatically. So let's go ahead and have a look at my exam tips. So what are my exam tips? Well, you can use bucket policies to make entire S3 buckets public, but first you need to uncheck those 4 boxes before you can do anything. So do remember that for the real world, as well as for the exam. And then you can use S3 to host static websites such as .html websites. Websites that require database connections such as WordPress, etc. cannot be hosted on S3. So often they'll refer to it as static versus dynamic. Static websites can be hosted on S3. Dynamic websites cannot be hosted on S3. And then just remember that S3 scales automatically to meet your demand. Many enterprises will put static websites on S3 when they think there's going to be a large number of requests, such as for a movie preview, for example. So that is it for this lecture, everyone. If you have any questions, please let me know. If not, feel free to move on to the next lecture. Thank you.